Good evening, people that are with us live in person and those that are linked up. The microphone is now on. I'd like to welcome you all this evening, and I'd like to call the meeting of the Heritage Advisory Committee Monday, December 9th, 2024 to order. Starting with the land acknowledgement, the town of Aurora acknowledges that the Anishinaabe lands on which we live and work are the traditional and treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island, as well as many other nations whose presence here continues to this day. As the closest First Nation community to Aurora, we recognize the special relationship the Chippewas have with the lands and waters of this territory. They are the water protectors and environmental stewards of these lands, and as a municipality, we join them in these responsibilities. We further acknowledge that Aurora is part of the treaty lands of the Mississaugas and Chippewas, recognized through Treaty 13, as well as the Williams Treaty of 1923. A shared understanding of how the rich cultural heritage that has existed for centuries and how our collective past brought us to where we are today will help us walk together into a better future. Folks, could I please get approval of tonight's agenda? And moved by David Hurd, seconded by John Green. Thank you. Those in favor, motion carries. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest or nature thereof? I see none. Could I please get a motion to receive the minutes of our last meeting, October 7th? Moved by John Green, seconded by... Oh, and I should look at the hands behind me just in case. Seconded by Rocco. And any questions, comments on those minutes? All in favor? Motion carries. We do have one delegation here this evening, and I would invite Mr. Christopher Watts to join us. From the Aurora Heritage Authority to address us with some comments and information about the town's architectural salvage program. Mr. Watts, welcome aboard.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chair, evening committee. And yes, I'm here tonight to talk about the town's, what I understand is defunct architectural salvage program, just to give and get a more fulsome understanding of what's has or hasn't accomplished over its 19-year history. If we can get to the next slide. So at the last meeting of the committee, the chair asked me to contact staff with regards to questions about this, and I have. But my understanding of this program goes much farther back, and I delegated at this committee 13 years ago on this subject. And when I was doing that, I was seeking information for KPIs to understand and to measure the success of the program at that time. And those are still greatly unanswered. But seems to be a bigger question, and is the program even running? Yes or no, which should be an obvious kind of question to answer, and it should be easy to discern externally, and that doesn't seem to be the case. Linda, can we grab the... So I just wanted to share the email communication from the middle of November with staff, and I've highlighted some elements here because what's being communicated to me is this program ended in 2017, has not run since 2017, and it predates the manager's time with the town. So this is a little bit confusing to try and correlate with everything else. Linda, can we go to the next slide? The first reason is in April of 2019, so a whole year and 4 months after this program was supposedly ended, it's actually referred to in an agenda item for the committee acted upon for property being removed from the register. And the current manager was in attendance for that. Secondly, the official plan 2024 approved in January references the architectural salvage program as a key principle. And it's on page 165, and I've referenced or circled section P for you to understand how it's being referenced. Next. This program is actually referenced externally by other municipalities. So I've pulled forward a 2023 report from Cambridge comparing Aurora's efforts alongside 4 other municipalities while it was trying to draft terms of reference for their salvage plan. The next one is Kitchener in 2020, referencing the town's salvage program and a heritage impact assessment. Seems strange for a program that was potentially ended. Next is the program that was ended in 2017. There was enough effort to launch materials for a guide and a form in December of 2017. So I question why a great effort would be made to roll those out in the end of a year when the program was ended. So I can't find any indication externally anywhere where it's communicated out that this program ended in 2017. But I do understand that, and I think I've put on this slide 2017, but I think it's 2019. There was a delegation of authority that council gave staff to manage and operate this program. I don't think there ever was any expectation of it being shuttered. So we're looking at 2017 when those new guides came in. And I question in the interim between now and then, that's 7 years, where's a staff report to the committee, to the council, to community with respect to the program being deactivated or reactivated or having any significant changes? Because I don't see any. And I'm looking for any documentation that kind of supports that. If you go through, and I encourage you all to pull the files for the 2017 program guide. The idea is there's 2 streams for salvaging. There's on-site or off-site. And I want to kind of, and I know I'm kind of exhausting my time here, but I wanted to kind of share with you some examples for both of those so you could kind of understand that. And hopefully there's enough time to do this. So for on-site, my whole questions are really how many properties have been demolished and that have had clauses in their clauses for demolition for items to be salvaged. How many of those items were salvaged and how many of those salvage items ended up really getting reused? So I've pulled forward 97 Wellington, luckily not demolished, but you'll see here, there's a clause saying, should it be demolished, that effectively there are items that should be salvaged. I'm looking for a report from staff that shows a database saying that they're monitoring these and that they're on the radar for it. So it doesn't happen because documentation is important. My next example is the George Browning House. This house scored a 91%, but the council of the day voted to demolish it. What I've included here is the conditions that the demolition was supposed to be approved based off that items would be salvaged to be incorporated into this Montessori school that had a planning application before it to be displayed in the lobby. That plan never occurred, but the salvaged items were stored and were to be made available to the town. So I ask, were the items offered to the town? Yes or no? Were items received or rejected? Yes or no? Where is the record of any follow-up with regards to this? The next example is the Isaac Petch farmhouse. It's completely different than the Petch house that you know that the town rebuilt. This is or was located on Wellington south of where the Walmart Plaza is. And bricks were saved by the owner for the purpose to be incorporated into the future site. Well, that future site now is like a storage facility and a farm boy and some other things. I haven't seen any effort made to restore or bring those back, but in the photo that I provided, you can see the effort was made on behalf of the owner to actually salvage them. There's pallets of those bricks. So what happened? Why didn't that move forward if it was a condition of the demolition? Now, the other part of it is for offsite. So with offsite pieces, if you go back to my communication with staff, they seem to question the significance of items that were saved. And there's a couple inventory pieces. There's a 2013 initial inventory, which looks like this, has about 300 items. Then there's another one that's a little bit more expansive, has some more fields beside it, only has about 190 items. So there's still kind of a confusion as to really what those items were. How did they get divested? Maybe we can just roll through a couple of these other slides. Just for sake of time. Yeah, we'll just go ahead. So the question ultimately with that is, I can't pull at a reference of anything to show consistently what was saved with what purpose and what went where. Because if you look at this master list, there are large beams mixed in with things like interior doors, and it's very, very muddled. So that's this report. Okay, next. So these are the two documents that I'm currently referencing. Sorry, next one. So there's a couple properties that are after these inventory sheets, but before 2017, when this program was apparently shuttered and items were divested. One of them here is 45 Tyler, where again, items were offered. I asked, were any claimed? I didn't list it in here for sake of time, whatever it is. 101 Tyler, so just down the street, Collis Leather. There was a walkthrough done. Items were identified. Were any salvaged? Don't know. Next. 95 Wellington. There's remarks here that a condition that a site visit be held. Maybe there was one. But where is the documentation that goes alongside when a site visit is held? The report comes back and says, oh yeah, these items really aren't worth salvaging. That has to be documented, it has to be saved, and it has to be brought forward. And I'm just not seeing that. And lastly, there are items that are salvaged that don't go back in the community for being repurposed or purchased. They get directed into the museum. And that's true from the very beginning of this, in the 2005 formation of this. Go forward. So I saved the 2011 presentation. You can see here in the photos here, there's some significant pieces. There's actually like a toll booth from the GO station. There's really large doors. And we know that those ended up making it to the museum. The concern I have is, I can reference this document quick enough. Even the Historical Society was saying, and this was at the point where they actually held the Aurora collection before it was handed over to the town, the list of architectural fragments in the Aurora collection database should be used as a guide to match with materials that may be stored amongst the salvage collection here. I don't see that effort has been made, and I question effectively what has been saved. So I think that needs to be opened up and brought forward. And then the reference numbers need to kind of match up and say, oh, we saved these things, because I'd like to know how many items were saved in that 45-year period. So what I'm really after is how many things have been saved in whatever that 50-year period is that have actually made it to the museum. Because since 2013, has anything been saved and given to the museum? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. And what the basis of this is, you can't manage what you don't measure, and you can't measure what you don't report. So I think you guys are left with a lot of questions, hopefully the same as what I have, as to really what has happened here and what should be happening, what the expectation is for this program. And hopefully we can get this thing back on track so that we're not going out into the community and saying we're doing one thing, but it's kind of in preface when we're really not doing what we're saying we're doing. So I've got some documents here and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Watts. Could I please, before we get to questions or possible questions, could I please get a motion from the table to receive comments from the delegation? Moved by Dave, seconded by Rocco. Do we have any questions or comments for the delegate? John, go ahead.
Yes, Christopher, you've given us all this material and you are indicating that it didn't live up to what the commitment was. Is that correct?
Salvage program. Ask amongst your group, have you done anything with your roles and responsibilities that are outlined in the 2017 program collectively for this program? Like, is it running? Ask yourself that question. If so, how is it running? If not, but you've got to communicate it out to the community. You got to at least have these pieces being discussed amongst yourself. And council has to be on top of this as well. And it's unfortunate tonight that we don't have a council representative, attached to the committee that can bring this upwards. But I think Councillor Weiss has joined us. But my question is back to you, the same thing. Does it live up to the expectations? No, the expectations are listed in multiple documents. There's even the Southeast District references a salvage program, right? There's a lot of documents that reference this thing. I haven't seen any evidence since things changed in 2017 of it actually being exercised or used.
Very good. Thank you. Any other questions? David?
There we are. To you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Watts, thanks for coming and seeing I'm sitting in Councillor Weiss's chair. I'll thank you for your dedication to heritage, which you delegated in front of us many times. Because of your dedication, I'm going to ask the sort of little leeway here. You've obviously pointed that you believe there's a flaw in the system, a fly in the ointment. How do you see, I realize you're not a member, how do you see that if there is a challenge with this program, us getting it upright? What would you suggest?
Understand what you don't know about this program. And I don't know a lot of this program just by, these are the documents. This is what it says it is. There is nothing being formulative and, substantive and formally brought outwards. So unless you guys are holding on to all the knowledge, which I don't think is the case, I mean, these pieces are supposed to be on the town website and communicated outwards. If there is in the program saying that some people can put things into the program, there is no means right now, if you go to the town website and go into the heritage planning thing, there is a reference to the wood plaque program. There's no tie even to these documents. You can't even find them unless you do a web search. And you know how hard it is to do anything in a web search with the town website. So when you read other pieces in this saying that there's efforts that the town staff should be making to communicate this outwards, and they mentioned, well, using opportunities like Tours Open, I mean, I don't see that those have happened as well. So I think you need to write the communications piece. I think you need to, amongst yourself, understand that, if the expectation is set and it's already been approved into our official plan, that has to be lived up to. And the thing is, you have a guide. You just need to do it. So.
Go ahead, Dave.
Correctly, I heard a couple of points that kind of alluded to transparency and updating of the website. Is that correct? Would that be on sort of your top of your list to righting the ship, as I said earlier?
There's objectives already here. And it even lists your involvement. It lists the role that the Heritage Advisory Committee has in this. And I haven't seen anything come back to this body or this body be involved in any way, shape, or form with a salvage piece and that it be reported out. So has that occurred? Ask yourself that. And then if it has occurred, why hasn't it made it outwards? Yeah, I think there's a lot that can, through open data, through the town's bylaw for transparency, this stuff needs to have a home and go out. I was asked to submit a FOI request to get something as basic as how many buildings or properties were demolished in a certain time. That's something you guys should all have as a committee, access to have that just as an answer from town staff. But it should also be on the town website. It's not. But as a citizen, when I'm asked to go and have to go and file an FOI request to get something as basic, I ask, well, then I can't take that number without going through that hurdle and then putting up it against the stuff that's salvaged to understand what the percentage is. And that's where you really have to get at is how successful is this program being? How many things have been saved? And how do you change that? So yeah, get this information together, get it out, and then amongst yourselves, start to do what's the role that's set for you in this program guide. Start to work on it. Thanks.
Thank you. Adam Robb.
Yes, thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, I'd just like to take a moment to address some of the comments and some of the history being made, because there is admittedly a convoluted history here, a quite lengthy history, but I can hopefully provide some clarity and clarify some of the comments from the delegate as well. So first and foremost, I think the delegate jumped over arguably his most important slide, which was that in 2017, there was a report from staff and the Heritage Committee where they assessed all the items remaining in the program. In 2017, it was determined that none of those items had any value remaining, and they were given away to the public. That was in 2017, and that effectively marked the end of the storage of those materials by the town, because it was determined that none of those items had any value. Additionally, the Heritage Salvage Program, the Architectural Salvage Program, from day one, has been rooted in the merit of town storage as a last resort. What I mean by that, and it's written in the program guide as well, is that as a best practice in heritage planning, we are to encourage on-site reuse by the owners. Prior to 2017, and in the 2011 to 2017 period, and even prior to that, items were quite frankly salvaged that didn't have significant value. And that's what led to staff in the Heritage Committee in 2017 deeming that there were no items remaining that had value. And further to that, on-site reuse was not prioritized. So since 2017, and the delegate did mention a memo I did in 2019, actually, which tried to reactivate the program in line with its true intentions. And that true intention is to first and foremost encourage reuse on site as a first measure, and then consider town storage as a last resort. And again, that language is essentially word for word codified in the program guide. And I would like to make that abundantly clear to this Heritage Committee so that there's absolutely no confusion. The Heritage Salvage Guide and the program guide also stipulates that storage is to be made available by the town, again, as a last resort, and subject to the appropriate space being available. These are very key considerations that haven't been entirely communicated effectively. I'll take credit for some of that, but I want to make that clear through this delegation as well. If there are any other questions, I would be more than happy to respond to them, to answer them, and to clarify these expectations moving forward. And lastly, I will say the Heritage Salvage Program does still exist. What ended in 2017 was that storage of materials by the town. But what I encourage this committee, and through any demolition request we have moving forward, is to encourage reuse on site as a first and utmost priority. And we have had good success with owners since 2017, and since that, quote unquote, phase of the program ended, it has been successful. I actually thank the delegate for finding that 97 Wellington Street East example from myself that I wrote a report or memo in 2019. And quite frankly, I was a bit disappointed that, certain elements of our conversations were highlighted and others weren't. Because in 2019, that property, first of all, didn't end up being demolished, but that was an example of successful condition of on-site reuse being implemented. We didn't have a demolition permit in that case, and that stained glass is still in that window. We also have used reuse on-site in other applications since then as well. A great example is 158 Carisbrook Circle. That is, in my opinion, an excellent example of reuse within that modern subdivision. And just to be abundantly clear, should any demolition request come through this committee, I encourage every single member to, at that time, speak to whether you think any significant architectural item should be salvaged, and we can request that of the owner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robb. Any other questions or comments from David? Don't
My
forget.
question's actually towards staff. So should I leave it now or after the delegate leaves, or should I ask now?
I can't hear Linda, but I can see that her lips are moving. I'm going to guess she's saying do it in new business. So at this time, I would like to thank you very much, Christopher, for all your comments and your presentation to help to clarify where we're at and where we're not at. Thank you. Members, on with the meeting. We have two matters for consideration, and we need to vote on the motion that's on the floor to receive the comments from the delegation. Those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. 7.1, memorandum from the Manager, Policy Planning and Heritage regarding draft Heritage Awards Program Guide. So let me turn a page. Could I get a mover and seconder to put this item on the floor for discussion and comments? Moved by John, seconded by, don't see any hands on the screen. Rocco, did I see your hand go up? Thank you. So, just a moment. So what we currently have on the floor is that the memorandum regarding the draft Heritage Awards Program Guide be received, and that comments from this committee regarding the program awards program guide be received and referred to staff for consideration and further action as appropriate. And I would, before we get into discussion, Adam, would you like to please speak to the item that
Yes, absolutely. Through you, Mr. Chair. So this memorandum speaks to the development of the Heritage Awards Program Guide, or can be somewhat referred to as a terms of reference in terms of the structure of how we want to run the program. This is further to the delegation and discussion from our last meeting. This Heritage Awards Program largely mirrors a former awards program that was run by the town, focusing now this time in the categories of residential buildings, commercial and institutional buildings, and then a category for general heritage awareness and achievement that isn't necessarily tied to a physical built heritage structure, but rather contributions from an individual organization to heritage awareness or heritage achievement within our community. Again, this remains draft at this time, but if there are any comments from the Heritage Committee, we can update it accordingly prior to proceeding to council for their endorsement sometime in the new year.
Thank you very much. Comments, questions? David?
Mr. Chair, the Heritage Awards, I received one myself. I believe Bob McRoberts was the person who nominated me, so I did appreciate receiving that. It's proudly on my wall. With a program like this, I'm glad to see it's on the in for discussion. I think what we need first and foremost before we enter into the Heritage Awards is a higher profile for our heritage. I think number one, I think we need to like inspire people. I think I'm concerned because I think our heritage is on the back burner right now. I really do. And I really believe that, like I said, we need a higher profile, and that means this committee or with the communications department of the museum, I think we really need to develop that awareness through whether it's creating small videos about, inspiring moments in our community. Because I think with this, the one category that I think is truly missing is getting our youth engaged. If we're going to keep our heritage or put our heritage on the front burner, we need to get our youth inspired. I think that's a given. And, if that means also bringing back through the youth a heritage fair competition, which I know has happened in the past, or a heritage public speaking program, something to keep our heritage again, inspiring our youth. Because if we don't, what do they say? Like history, it will die if we don't keep storytelling. And I think right now, and I've been preaching about that advocacy and awareness since the beginning of the committee. And that's just my comments.
Thank you, David. I do see on the screen, Cynthia, your hand is up. Please go ahead.
Thank you. And hi, everyone. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. So yeah, I not surprisingly, I completely agree with the point that David has made. And I'm happy to report that there are opportunities coming up where students will be working on developing some heritage projects through as a co-op placement. Adam and I met to discuss that. So those plans are in the works as a continuation of the conversation last year that we had about that project. So I think that I would have to agree with David if we could add a category for youth, and we can extend that beyond 18. It can be, it can be 12 to 25, whatever the age is. But I do think there's a missed opportunity there. And I think that what we'll find is that it will gain momentum with young people when they start to see that there are ways of caring about history in your local community and being recognized for caring for your local history. So I do think that is a category that you might want to consider adding.
Thank you. Other comments, questions? Rocco, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair, maybe one thing that I'd like to see, I see it kind of revolving around buildings and heritage sites. Maybe there's something that we can put in here for like preservation of any artifacts, somebody discovering any artifacts or displaying artifacts, that represent our heritage in Aurora, not necessarily like buildings. If that can be considered.
Very good. Thank you. And Linda, is there something that shuts this mic off, or is it just when I stop speaking, sometimes it... Anyhow, I'll get used to it. Couple more meetings. As we're all aware, we're just making comments. We're not drawing conclusions. So I see that Adam is taking a few notes as well. We did do this in the past, had an awards event, and I don't have a clear memory of, but I think we sometimes had a separate evening for just heritage awards. I'm not sure if that's the best route to go, especially if we didn't get nominations in too many categories. I see that it could also maybe be linked with just as sometimes things are presented at a council meeting or committee of the whole meeting so that winners can shake the mayor's hand or something like that. Because I'm not sure if it's, of course it's special, I just don't know if it's enough to be a separate event. But I guess that we could decide that at some point, depending on the nominations that come forward. I think too, we started as an annual event, and then biannuals seem to be a little bit easier to run. Because I think if we did it annually, I'm not sure that we would run out at some point, exhaust. But at the same time, I'm wondering, and I guess we can think of that as we go along, whether biannual is too often. Perhaps not initially. I'm wondering what the award looks like. I'm assuming it's probably a plaque. But then I'm wondering the money source. I'm assuming it would come out of the Heritage Fund, depending how much is left in that fund due to Petch House enhancements. And I wonder the nomination form. I'm assuming it's too early to consider what that would look like, but rather than, I think initially the committee was choosing winners, won't say at random, but I don't think we had a nomination process. And to me, the nomination process sounds like a much better way to go. Because we as committee members don't necessarily know everything of what's out there. I think those are my comments. Anything from anyone else? I do like the comments that were suggested about the youth and possible artifact salvaging. And I do like what you put together. It seemed to make sense.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, just a quick comment to add, if that's okay.
Yeah.
In terms of the timing, I know we talked about, David mentioned heritage fairs, which I think are an excellent idea and an absolutely untapped opportunity. It maybe what would be a good idea is to maybe do 1 year heritage fair, the next year the awards, and run it that way, so that we have a year to sort of build capacity, and then the awards are happening every other year, so that we have some examples or some evidence of those people who are championing local history in the event that there's maybe not enough nominations. So that might be a good sort of compromise, at least at first, until things sort of build capacity.
Cynthia, could you just say that again? I didn't catch what the beginning of what you said.
Oh, there. Sorry. I'm sorry. So what I suggested was, if we don't want to give it out every year because of a concern that maybe we wouldn't have enough capacity to award it on an annual basis, then perhaps we could marry that idea with the heritage fairs, which David suggested, which I think are an excellent idea. And there's so many different jurisdictions that do that. And I think there's a lot of infrastructure in place to support a community in launching that kind of an event. Maybe 1 year could be the heritage fairs and the year after could be the heritage award. And then this way, through the heritage fairs, we would have examples of people championing local history that would at least maybe bolster some of the nominations and give us more opportunity to award this type of recognition for individuals involved.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Go ahead, John.
In listening to the comments so far, it occurs to me that with any award, it should be meaningful and it should be worth it. So if somebody puts a lot of effort into bringing forward something that they believe is worth presenting and making the public aware of, then they should be awarded for it. So there should be, I believe, a set of guidelines, and maybe a number of categories, probably 1, 2, 3, 4 categories, and then the reward itself. Now, earlier was mentioned about the Heritage Fund, whether money would be taken from the fund, I don't know, but something worthwhile like $1,000 that went along with the presentation of a certificate might be well worth contemplating, because then people think, it's not something that's just a piece of paper. It does have a value attached to it. So there are a few comments.
Thank you. David?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just one comment. When I'm looking at the award categories, it states individuals, businesses, groups, or organizations. I think I'd love to see a split. It be individuals and then business groups and organizations. Sometimes I think some of us know people who individually decide to become champions of heritage, and I wouldn't want to see them, up against an award against, groups of people, like a business that may have several employees, or a group, or an organization, a service club. I just think there should be a split there. And probably some more categories are, in regards to the Outstanding Heritage Achievement Award for that category. That's my comment.
Very good. Thank you. Any others? All right. I would call the vote, please. Those in favor of the motions on the floor. Motions carry. 7.2, Memorandum from the Manager, Policy Planning and Heritage. Read the draft Heritage Grant Program. So just get that in front of me. So the motions would be that the memorandum regarding the draft Heritage Grant Program be received, and that committee comments regarding the grant program be received and referred to staff for consideration and further action as appropriate. Could I please have a mover and seconder to put these items on the floor? Moved by Rocco, seconded by Dave. Thank you. Adam, would you like to share your thoughts?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, this draft Heritage Grant Program has been developed largely based on some of the initial comments that we also received from the Heritage Advisory Committee back when we presented initial feedback opportunities June of this past year. This document does still remain draft. It is still subject to any additional comments that we can receive and incorporate into a finalized version that we would take to council early in the new year. But as you can specifically see on the second page of the memo, significant attempts were made to largely capture the full extent of the comments that were received from the Heritage Advisory Committee, such as comments about graffiti removal, about having implementable tiers of the program, setting a cap, but also recognizing that there could be growth potential in the future, and recognizing that heritage permit approval would also most often coincide with heritage grant applications being reviewed and approved as well. But further to the comment about graffiti, recognizing that there may be opportunities where a heritage permit isn't always required. And then determining eligibility of works and eligibility of opportunities to receive the grant once every 5 years. I'm sure there could be additional comments I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you very much. Comments or questions, committee? David?
Yeah, just to, through you, Mr. Chair, to comment on Mr. Rob's, I noticed the reference to the graffiti. I was speaking with Mr. Rob recently in regards to the, graffiti concern. I've seen more graffiti in our heritage areas than I have in, for example, in the east side of the community. I've done a lot of traveling around, driving around, checking it out. And there seems to be a concentration, and it's troubling because we see it repeating. So my question with this is, with something like that, we've seen businesses, I can mention a couple of them, that will go and take the graffiti down and it's back up again in the same location. We're seeing the same places hit. How would this program, like if someone over and over, and also I think this is very important to me with our heritage, because right now we know our BIA they were involved in such things, and our BIA is now no longer. So I think helping out our heritage properties with looking good, if that is part of this, I think we need to be conscious that, the graffiti is a concern. And how would reoccurring, or do we need a separate program? And maybe council should bring it to the table. I'm not telling them what to do, but I'm just making a suggestion through this committee. Maybe it's time to bring back a committee to deal with that.
Thank you. Cynthia, your hand is up.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I'm really happy to see this draft proposal. I think it really reflects a lot of the conversations that have happened at the meetings over the last little while. And I think the fact that there's a tiered approach, I think makes it accessible for homeowners for different reasons, or property owners for different reasons. The graffiti, that is a whole other, I think, conversation that I don't know that there's a solution to that. I wish there was an easy solution to it, but I think given that that is included in that, then hopefully, if it's, as David said, if it's repetitive graffiti in the same area, the same property, then obviously consideration would be given, or that would be the hope at least. But I'm happy to see the different tiered approach. And sorry, Adam, you said it was every 3 years or 5 years, or that hasn't been decided? I can't hear you at all.
Oh,
there
sorry
you
about
go. Okay.
Sorry about that.
Now I can hear you. That's okay.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So it's been drafted currently as 5 years because we do want to allow opportunities for multiple homeowners to take advantage of the grant and utilize that source. But further to David's comment too, if we do see incidences of graffiti on a repetitive basis, I am confident that this program could handle that. And we have built-in wording and language into the document so that this grant program can actually be a vehicle for remedying that on multiple circumstances, recognizing that it would be on an exceptional basis at the committee and council's discretion to award multiple rounds of grant funding, as again, on an exceptional basis.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Adam. Other questions, comments? David?
Just a quick comment. The delegate tonight, Mr. Watts, did delegate in regards to this program. So I want to thank him for the hard work he put into that. And hopefully it did light a little bit of a fire. So if my understanding, I want to be clear on this, is the work would be completed through you, Mr. Chair and Mr. Rob, the work would be completed and then the funds would be given, correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair. Sorry about that. The mic cut out. Yes, that is correct. So just like any sort of rebate program that you may see from other levels of government too, the actual funding mechanism would come on final inspection. Final inspection would occur through staff as well as Heritage Committee members when that opportunity arises to verify that the work's been done to an acceptable standard and based on the credentials that were presented as part of the award approval. I believe, a good opportunity for a homeowner, if they're trying to weigh finances or certain circumstantial matters, would be to apply for this would be no cost. They could get an approval and again, not have spent a dime technically. And then once you have the confidence of an approval, you at least have that acknowledgement that you are approved for the work, such that you can then partake in the required financing to complete the work under the recognition that you will be getting the funding if it's done to the required satisfactory level.
Thank you. David?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Rob again. Are there any programs outside of municipal level that you're aware of provincially or federally for residential or business dwellings that are heritage for upkeep?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, the province and the federal governments, they will provide grant opportunities. Sometimes they're hit or miss, or, you know, one year it's there, the next it's not. So I can't speak to what programs they currently offer. I could do research on that and report back if needed. I am aware of Parks Canada specifically offering grant programs on a pretty recurring basis. But then their eligibility may change year over year. Sometimes it could only be nationally recognized buildings. Sometimes it could be broader, right? So the eligibility and requirements and criteria across the province or the federal government may change year over year, but there are opportunities out there. Yes.
Go ahead, Dave.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Microphone.
Oh, sorry. If we have an opportunity to encourage outside of our municipality for, you know, those who have bigger coffers, I think the research would be appreciated, what those programs are, and make our heritage property owners, business or residential, aware that there are other opportunities, and maybe that it may be funds that are available before the work is done, potentially. This is where I'm going at. So, I mean, I've talked to many, as you're aware, Mr. Robin, Adam, I've had discussions about this where I've spoken to property owners who have spoken to, you know, the challenges of upkeeping. And in today's economy, I can imagine it's even more challenging. So this is a welcome program. And again, thank you for those who have advocated for it. And as I said, I did my part to chatter with the, you know, the people, especially around the downtown area and Moseley and everything. And any way we can keep our heritage beautiful moving forward, it's welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Go ahead, Adam.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. All noted comments. And the one additional component I want to speak to as well is the comment being made when we were initially consulting on this about engaging with local hardware providers and seeking opportunities for refund or discounting of materials and assistance through that manner. That is something we still plan on running parallel to this program as well, to provide an additional level of funding assistance for homeowners.
Thank you. I had John, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Is anybody on the committee here aware of another municipality that has operated one of these heritage facade programs and found it to be successful?
Adam?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. As we developed this program, we certainly looked at a municipal best practice approach. We canvassed municipalities that are performing this Heritage Grant program in a similar manner across the province to see what is a best practice. And that is largely rooted in this document, in that similar to the comments that we received from the committee, having a tiered approach, having a certain standard of eligibility, quite frankly, waiting for funding till final inspection, that is a best practice as well. So that's also really been codified in this document as a canvassing of across municipalities across the province in terms of what the best practices for this type of program.
Thank you. Okay, John? Good. When I was reading this, it jogged my memory on comments from the committee when you brought this to us originally, and thank you for incorporating such things. There were 2 or 3 spots that I just wondered about. And I might just be misreading it, or I'm not sure if there's a twist on some logic or not. The first being on page 4 of the report, but it's page 19 of our agenda. Ineligible projects under new window, the second last nugget, new windows that replace repairable original windows. And then I wrote, but what if the window, what if it's not repairable? I just wonder if it's simpler to say no, ineligible being new windows. Go ahead, Adam.
Through you, Mr. Chair. That is posted under the ineligible side just because we don't necessarily want to encourage new windows to be replacing original ones. That being said, if there is an exceptional circumstances, this document has been written such that there is full discretion of the committee and council to make recommendations if there is a unique circumstance that presents itself. But that's why that is considered ineligible, and that is going back to a municipal best practice review. Most municipalities do have that as an ineligible, just because, again, as a best practice, you would try to encourage restoration of the originals if possible.
Very good. Thank you. On page 22 of 26, our agenda, or page 7 of the report, the last paragraph, eligible applicants. And I just, the first line says property owners of multiple properties are eligible to apply for only one grant each year. So my thought was, so could multiple property owners apply and receive one grant every year?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the program was developed based on property owners, but also more specifically on the buildings themselves. So that 5-year timeline is focused on the building, the actual asset, so to speak. But if there is an individual that happens to own multiple properties and they do want to apply for grant funding for multiple properties, that is something that can be considered, certainly, yes.
Thank you. I wondered if you could clarify the bottom, the last sentence on page 23 of the agenda, page 8 of the report. The Heritage Grant Program is not applicable to retroactive projects. What's a retroactive project?
Yes, certainly, through you, Mr. Chair. That just simply states that the Heritage Grant Program will only be applying on a future basis in terms of applications and work that we receive from this point moving forward.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Thank you. And so if it's major works, we could go up to $10,000 of a grant. And if there is a, I'm looking at page 6, if there's a yearly overall cap of 30,000, then I'm assuming then that could be maximum three projects of 10,000.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, that's correct. I do think this is, again, the first iteration of this document, right? So based on the comments we heard too, if there is success in this program moving forward, I think one of the comments we heard when we were consulting on this was the means of having that cap just as sort of almost a pilot, right? Just to, test the water, so to speak, in the first inception of this program. But then if we want to exceed those caps or increase those caps in the future, we certainly can. And it would be up to the Heritage Committee as well in terms of how we want to recommend to council the allocation between major, moderate, and minor. In a best case scenario, we would receive applications that, have an array of 1, 2, and 3 there, major, moderate, or minor. But yes, theoretically, if the desire is for 3 major projects to reach that 30,000, that could be a circumstance. Yes.
Thank you. The cap of 30,000, is this coming from the Heritage Fund or from the general budget?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. It is intended that the Heritage Grant Program would be funded through the Heritage Reserve Fund. And further to that, there is a balance that is sufficient for this program.
Is it conceivable then that the Heritage Fund could be, I don't know what amount is there, and I don't know how the Petch House fits in financially, what council ultimately decided, but I think there was something like 300,000, and if the washrooms were going to go in the Petch House, 250,000 was going to disappear from the Heritage Fund, something like that. So this would only run 1 or 2 years.
Through you, Mr. Chair. No. So even, again, I don't have the exact number in front of me, but let's even ballpark it at 200K remaining in the Heritage Reserve Fund with a 30,000 yearly cap that's still running for, 10 years, or sorry, excuse me, quick math, 6 or 7 years right there. But then there would be opportunities to replenish the Heritage Reserve Fund concurrently to this program running.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other comments, questions? All right, let me go back to the, Rocco, go ahead.
Through you,
Sorry, I might have messed your mic.
there you go. One comment I had was, is this covering 100% of the cost? Because so if he has a cost estimate for someone has a $10,000 cost estimate, it'd be 100% of the cost covered.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So those eligible works, those are the maximum threshold. If an owner applies and say their work is $11,000, we would only be covering 10,000. And if their work is under that threshold, we're only covering up to the work that their estimate value is. And that's one reason too that the estimate upfront is an important tool as part of this program.
Go ahead,
So
Rocco.
what I've seen municipalities, if I'm not, Toronto has a program like this that they cover if your invoice or estimate is $10,000, that they would cover half of it or something like that. Maybe that might, allow a few more projects to be handled as opposed to covering the whole cost, maybe, reimbursing half or a certain percentage.
Right. Through you, Mr. Chair. So again, the way this program was structured is such that if there is sort of a gray area between what's moderate or what's major, for example, it'd be at the Heritage Committee and Council's decision, but ultimately you could lean towards the middle ground, right? The moderate level, such that gets the ball rolling on the project, but then it still reserves some balance so that we feel comfortable with that decision.
David, go ahead.
Mr. Chair,
Microphone.
whether or not, I'll give you an example. I'm going to play devil's advocate. A heritage property that was damaged through, let's say, something negligent happened, or the property was not covered by insurance, and the property has a damaged facade, let's say. How would that fit into this type of program? Because we clearly can't have a property, heritage property looking, worn or damaged. So how would that fit into a situation like this?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Obviously, there is a reasonable expectation that a homeowner does carry insurance, of course, but in a circumstance like that, they would be eligible for major works as an application through us. And if we want to award $10,000, that would be an avenue to consider, certainly.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none. Let's call the question. Those in favor of the motions? Motion's carried. Thank you. 8 on the agenda, informational items. We have no informational items this evening. Number 9, new business. Does anyone have any new business? Go ahead, Dave.
Through you. Done. Oh, boy, I hate this chair. I wanted to bring up in regards to the presentation earlier. I said I was going to bring this up on new business. I'd like to know from Mr. Rob if you can update us. So back in, I believe it was the term 2010 through 2014, I sat on the Heritage Committee. Mr. McRoberts will recall we attended 45 Tyler Street with a visit. We were asked if there was any artifacts within the property of 45 Tyler, which we thought should be salvaged and preserved. I do recall items like, for example, the time clock and a punch board. There was some other items. There was some carts, different items that were identified as having significance to the history of the company that operated there. I was wondering through the chair to Mr. Rob, is there any way we can get an update? What was salvaged from 45 Tyler, seeing it was referenced tonight?
Adam?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. So any artifacts would have been ascended into the museum's collection, right? So we could speak to the museum to see if there are artifacts there. But in terms of the salvage program specifically, it would have been determined in 2017 should any materials have been, collected. Again, I truthfully don't know from that work over a decade ago. But if there were items collected in 2017, it was determined by staff and the Heritage Committee at that time that no items had value for reuse. That being said, though, I do want to make it clear that if there were exceptional items, that the museum collection is an entirely separate collection of artifacts. And that is not part of the salvage program whatsoever.
Through me, you, Mr. That property, the number of people was employed. I'm hoping and praying that some of those items were put into the museum collection. I will definitely follow it up with the staff there. And I do want to suggest that I do am in agreement with the delegate tonight that an audit of some kind to give us this committee an idea, where we're at in a better position. I think that is clearly important. That it's tough. We're at the last meeting. Many of us, I'm sure, don't even know whether we're going to be on the committee in the next go around. So we're kind of in a tough position. But if so, we need to hit the reset button for the next committee and make sure we dot our I's and dot our T's moving forward. That's all I have.
Dave, do you want to formalize that in any way with a motion, or Adam, are you?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. If I can just ask a clarifying question. So in 2017, when staff and the Heritage Committee determined that all items remaining in the program at that time had no value for reuse and they were given away to the public for free or disposed of, the items have not been collected since that point, right? And since that point, the focus has been on reuse. So in terms of an audit, there are no materials, right, since 2017, and since staff and HAC at the time determined that there were no more any items available or for reuse.
Go ahead, Dave.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I was hoping for, was a clarification. The other thing I wanted to bring up is with the salvage program. My understanding of some of the contracts with demolition companies, that I am aware that some demolition companies take the contracts and the profits are in the salvage. So how would that fit in if the town is contracted, or whoever's contracted, the home or the property owner, whatever, a demolition company comes in and does their work, and the contract is that the demolition company receives the salvage? How does that fit in?
Adam?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So again, the priority since 2017 and moving forward with the program has been to encourage reuse on site. So again, if there is a significant architectural feature on a property, and again, the word significant is key, because we're not talking generic doors and generic items that, quite frankly, were collected in the past, but were not significant. But if there is a significant architectural feature that we see on any demolition coming forward, we can require that as a condition of approval to have that owner reuse that element as part of the new build. That should be encouraged, and that should be a condition of approval.
Thank you. For you, moving forward, like I was brought up earlier in regards to the property on Wellington Street East and the stained glass. I remember appearing before the Heritage Committee regards, because that property actually has connects back to my family. And the stained glass is consistent in a few of the buildings built by through our family. One on Tyler Street was actually demolished, and I appeared before the committee asking it for preservation, and they voted against it, much like what happened with 45 Tyler Street. But that's old history. Thank you. I just appreciate the clarifications.
Thank you, Dave. Cynthia will be right with you. Adam, go ahead.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Just in terms of 97 Wellington Street East, I believe that's the property you're referring to. That is quite frankly a good example of a condition of reuse being implemented on site. And it's quite frankly a good example of how the program should operate moving forward, right? So in terms of that property, I believe the question was asked by the delegate too, and I just want to make it clear that that actual condition becomes tied to any demolition permit issuance. It is explicitly flagged in our system, flagged in our software. Whenever that owner applies for a demolition permit, that is a condition that they salvage that stained glass and reuse it on site.
Thanks, Adam. Go ahead.
So through you, Mr. Chair, so for example, we're going to see some substantial development on Bursey Street, and we're aware that the developer won the appeal in regards to we're going to lose the Sisman's building. So, for example, the Sisman stamping old stamp building on Mosley Street with the beautiful yellow Aurora brick, that would be, if I'm hearing you correctly, would be flagged, that would be incorporated, or?
Adam?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So that's an entirely separate application. That's a OLT decision. When I was referencing 97 Wellington Street East, it would be our responsibility to require that as a condition of approval as we see fit. That is a separate matter, and that's an OLT decision. Right.
Okay. Cynthia, go ahead.
Just wanted to update the committee on the project that we started discussing last year. So as I alluded to earlier, I met with Adam. We've decided that the easiest way to execute this in-depth heritage research project is to have a co-op student connected to the heritage department of the town, just to pilot it and see how that goes at first. And then hopefully once they're met with success, consider how that might be continued in some capacity. So the process that I'm at right now is waiting to hear back from co-op teachers to confirm that they in fact have a student that would like to take that on as a co-op placement in second semester. That would be a senior high school student, a grade 11 or 12 student. I will support them in executing that project, and they will be working within the heritage department to do so. So there's some movement there. The project will mirror the project that was done for the city of Richmond Hill a couple of years ago, and the project that's presently happening for the town of Stouffville, focusing on their heritage properties as well. So I just wanted to update everybody on that.
Thanks very much, Cynthia, for the update. Go ahead, Dave.
Through you. That caught my attention, the opportunity for a co-op student. So a co-op student, like, has the application process been started? Will it be publicly announced? The reason I'm asking is I know a student who has done some work with me who is extremely passionate about history and wants to get involved, their career wants to be involved in being a museum curator. They're going to university. And I'm just thinking that this individual would be, impressive for it. So how would they go about, and when will it become public that the possible co-op is available?
So through you, Mr. Chair, David, for this project, the first pilot is just it's high school co-op students. And the reason for that is because of ease of access that I have to high school students. So Beyond that, in terms of it being post-secondary, I think that's determined by whether the Heritage Department, I'm not sure what's required in order to complete a post-secondary co-op placement. So that would be a conversation between the Heritage Department and whatever school. I know that universities have different parameters for approving co-op placements. That's outside of my realm of experience. So for this very small initial opportunity, it would be a high school co-op student.
Through you, Mr. Just to clarify, they are presently a high school student who is planning on attending university. They attend an Aurora High School at present.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I thought they were a university student. So through you, Mr. Chair, David, if you want to email me information about that student, I would be very happy to connect with the co-op teacher at the high school that they're at. There's certain parameters required in terms of placement and credits and things like that. But if you put me in touch with who the student is and the school that they're at, then I can do some of that legwork. Because if they're in high school, then that's an option, but it is going to depend on, there's a lot of edge jargon involved, but it really depends on their credits and what their schedule looks like this year. But I can certainly discuss that with them if they'd be interested.
Perfect.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I just want to echo some of those comments too, and just say that the co-op program through a high school student level is intended to be a liaison through their teacher primarily too, right? So we do require, their teacher to reach out to us, and then that formal process can begin, right? But yeah, if there is anyone interested, I encourage them to contact myself, and I can speak to my director as well in terms of taking the necessary steps to formalize that.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to really quickly clarify exactly what Adam said, it's not a matter of a student contacting them and saying, I want to do a co-op there. It has to follow the channels through the school. And there's a co-op teacher involved because the co-op teacher has to ensure that the placement is willing to accept a student, first of all, which I know Adam has spoken to his supervisors and they've agreed that they would take a student, one. But beyond that, there's other parties involved. You can imagine with minors, there's lots of parameters in place. So at this point, I don't know, David, if you, Adam, do you prefer that David send that contact to you or to me? Because I'm happy to run the conversation with the co-op teacher, but you tell me what you would like, what you prefer. Either way is fine with me.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, I think this is best to be pursued offline. Yeah, Cynthia, just call me and we can touch base, or David, we can talk about it as well. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
Very good.
Are we on new bit?
We are on new bit.
So just a couple of quick updates in regards to things that I brought up at previous heritage meetings. Well, I spoke at the, it's in the minutes, our last meeting in regards to the Aurora Pet Cemetery documentary being reshown potentially in the new year. I have extensive conversations with our staff representative, Adam, in regards to a documentary that I filmed back in 2015 and wanting it to be shown because it shows more of a grassroots, early, raw perspective of the pet cemetery. I'm happy to report that I had a meeting with Michelle Johnson and Phil Rose in regards to the potential of that documentary being shown. They have agreed that they are willing to view it and possibly even in the theater to see what it's like. So I'm hoping that the two will be incorporated together. Either way, it will be shown somewhere. I want to thank Adam for viewing it. I respect staff's opinion on it. I wanted a sort of a neutral perspective on what they thought of it. And if Adam wants to add any comments to what he saw, it will certainly help my case for the video being shown. if I may carry on and I also just want to provide an update that I also appeared, this being our last meeting, and I wish everyone luck in hopefully their skill set will get them into the next. I will say I hate these 2-year terms. It's hard to get your footing and your traction, especially with our challenges with heritage and what we're up against with, the bills and stuff that have put our backs against the wall. So I don't think 2 years is fair, but that's another case. I just want to add that I also brought up a presentation, and it's been going on for many years in regards to a project we called Victrolia Hall, which was bringing the history of music through a very expansive, impressive analog collection. You're all very aware that the format of vinyl has absolutely exploded in interest among all ages. It's like something from the past has taken on a new life. Museums and pubs and libraries are popping up all over the world. And I'm very proud to say I was probably one of the first people that actually came to council, talked to staff. And and I'm not blaming that it didn't get any traction, because, I could talk to I'm blue in the face, and I didn't expect anybody to see my vision. My vision was very, very large, very grandiose. And until people see it, I'm a very visual person. And I didn't expect, like I said, them to just open the doors. But however, my dream has occurred. And I want to thank Chair Bob McRoberts and Adam Robb and others in attendance who have come and seen the space. I now have a home for the collection on Vada Court. And it is making an impact on the community more than I ever thought it would. People are coming in and enjoying the space, and they're taken aback by the visuals and the sounds and the depth of the collection. So anyone on this committee or anyone in the community who wishes to come and feel the beauty of the format visually and auditorily, reach out to me, and I'll welcome you with open doors. Maybe it will become a doors open site. But again, I just want to say that it's happened, and hopefully this is just the beginning historically in Aurora for the music collection that I've curated. Thank you.
Thank you, David. You mentioned, part of what you said earlier just now got me thinking about continuity. And I think as a fairly long-time member of this committee, but singly, the town has gone through multiple heritage planners, and I'm glad that we have Adam on board. And I think both from a leadership position, i.e. Adam as heritage planner for us, it takes a while for such a person to get familiar with the town and the people and what's important and so on. But I also think it's important, and this is to some decision makers that are online with us this evening, that there be continuity among members of the committee, not necessarily all of the members needing to stay on board, but I think it's important so that things like the Salvage program, that there's I've got stuff on my computer from 2017, but it's not something that stayed fresh in my mind to have worthwhile comments. The project that Cynthia and David were just speaking about, as committee members to have the youth involved. And that was a big discussion of perhaps less than a year ago, but an initiative that I think is quite exciting. And if we lose all of the members of the Heritage Committee, we're lacking continuity, we're lacking what's gone before, and we would be lacking what it can sometimes take 2 years to get going. It can fizzle out quickly if the membership disappears. So I'm hoping that there will be some continuity of committee members and of leadership. Adam's sticking with us for the next 20, 30 years. That's wonderful. I'm not sure if there are thousands of members of the citizens of Aurora clamoring to be on the Heritage Committee. If so, that's exciting, but I think some overlap from 2 year to 2 year is important. Maybe that's why terms of council, partly why the terms of council are now 4 years and not 3 years, or 1 year like they were many years ago. Takes a while to get things going. Anyhow, that's my 2 cents, 2.5 cents. Any more items under new business? David, go ahead.
Just one comment to what I was saying earlier in regards to. Just want to go back to I mentioned about the music program that I've been working on. I also just want to add, it's kind of like an announcement. Very excited to, and I showed Adam that one of the things I'm doing with the collection is doing a lot of research on Aurora's music history and pulling curated pieces that directly connect to Aurora. And that, you know, that's growing. So this is a very local project. Having a space also has led to bigger things. I've had visits from counselors. Councillor Weiss came by. Thank you for that. Adam came by, the CAO, interim CAO, and some of the program people from the library. And it's led to some pretty awesome things in the community for, I believe, the community and myself. I'm very happy to announce that I've worked into an agreement with the Aurora Library. I will be sharing a holiday program this Saturday from 1 to 3:30 in the foyer, and also sharing 150 visuals of wonderful holiday album covers going across the big screen. So I'm sure it'll be a very positive distraction for many. And I know a lot of people that can use community spend time at the library. And this is one of the reasons the library has signed me on, because I do have a background as a social service worker, and add that with the music and my presentation skills to hopefully give people the warm and fuzzy over the holidays that may not feel so warm and fuzzy too. So the other thing is in the new year, I've also 3 more programs already signed with the library, and interest from staff at Town Square about bringing me on board. So I'm very, very excited. And I just want to say to, like I said, to the staff and council that have encouraged me to keep going. Thank you.
Good. I do have a question for Adam. The decision by OLT to demolish the remaining Sisman building, I don't know if there are worthy items to be salvaged. Rocco would say the yellow brick would be something that he would wish to have had in his renovations of his house on Spruce Street. But do we have any voice?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So obviously that's an OLT decision, so it is a bit of a different avenue. But one thing that still needs to run its course through the planning process is the site plan application. When that does come through, we will take a thorough review, recognizing that it is still a unique application, being that it is through an OLT approval. And at that site plan stage, we'd have to review at that time when the applicant comes in. Right now, it's still to be determined, and it's the OLT's decision on that matter. So,
Okay. Any other items for new business, folks? David?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Rupp, I realize it is an OLT, but if there's anything we can do to encourage the developer, I can't tell you how sad I am when I heard that the Sisman's building was potentially going to come down. This is a company that made the footwear for our military in the First and Second World War. This is a company that made skate boots for CCM. NHLers probably wore, skate boots on their blades, made here in Aurora, Ontario. Their product line was considered world-class. The Scampers, the Thoroughbuilt, incredible. My grandfather was given a job coming back from the war. My grandfather was struggling, his eardrums blown out in Northern Africa, anyway, my grandfather was given a job by Mr. Sisman, who, became the first president of the Aurora Legion. My grandfather and him, among with a small team, helped build the very first Legion on Yonge Street in Aurora. My father, who left Church Street School, first job he got, Sisman Shoe Company. One of my first jobs I had as a teenager was doing quality control on hides when Sisman was on Cousins Drive. Very special to me. How this came about, I think, is a travesty. I'm not happy. And there's nothing I can do about it because it's out of our hands because it's in the OLT. And now I'm being told that the OLT, it's out of our hands in trying to have any say in what's going to happen with that product. So if it means that early in this heritage term, one of the things I spoke very, very strongly about was if the province and maybe some others were going to hold us to a higher standard to having to, redesignate all these properties, 287, and make things challenging for us, and we only have a 2-year term, then I said, well, then advocacy and awareness and education was what we needed to do. Because to me, there wasn't really much else other than really raising awareness that our heritage is, I'll say it's under attack. We're losing so much of it. We've seen it. So what I'm saying is if there's any way for us to work with the developer, I have a substantial amount of artifacts from the Sisman Shoe Company. I prided myself in the two of the biggest companies were the Fleury Foundry, the Fleury Plow Company, and the Sisman Shoe Company, two of our biggest employers. And our museum was shuttered for so long, I decided to take it upon myself and bring artifacts back to Canada. And some of them were from way out of, I don't know what the heck they were doing in the United States or over in Europe. But my point is, visuals, advertising is what perishes mostly, paper material. I have a ton of artifacts from the Sisman Shoe Company. If there's any way that we can make sure the Sisman story is preserved, please, let's make it happen.
Thanks, Dave. Adam?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, those are absolutely worthwhile comments too. And I think one thing that I will reiterate too is the fact that when the time comes for an actual site plan to come in and we have more scrutiny over the renderings and details of the actual development from a site plan level, there will be a view to commemoration. And we can certainly consult the Heritage Committee at that time in terms of what that may look like.
Thank you. Any other items for this evening? I see no hands on the screen. So, folks, thanks for the last couple of years, and Merry Christmas to all.
Merry
But
Christmas,
before we
everyone.
before we do that, now I just got to make sure Linda doesn't yell. We need a motion to adjourn. David says, let's adjourn. Rocco says, good idea. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you all.